My parents threw me out so that my brother and his pregnant girlfriend could use my room as a nursery. They said I was lying about paying my rent, but I had been paying it. My family didn't have a lot of money, so my life wasn't easy. My brother Kevin and I didn't have much when we were kids. My dad worked in a plant, but it seemed like any money he made was always going to drugs. On the other hand, my mom worked as a cashier. She didn't make much money at her job. She had to deal with a lot of rude people, so every night she would smoke pot or get drunk. You can probably guess that the little money they got spent on their bad habits that cost a lot of money instead of taking care of me and my brother. Things were hard at home. There was never any good food in the house. There were times when our cabinets were almost empty and we had nothing to eat. We rarely had clean clothes, which was a treat. We slept on old, dirty blankets that were thrown on the floor. The little furniture we did have was either found at a thrift store or in someone's garden after they had thrown it away. We often didn't have the things we needed, and the house often felt more like a shelter than a place to live. You might be asking why CPS was never called. It's because the town where we lived wasn't much better. There were a lot of places where parents didn't care about their kids, so my brother and I didn't really have a way out. There were families all around us who were also lost in their own problems. It looked like no one cared about their kids. That's for sure not my parents. They didn't even stop to see if we went to school every day, let alone how we were doing in class. It seemed like they didn't care about our schooling or future. If we needed medicine when we were sick, or if we had dinner before going to sleep, they didn't care. Another thing was that Mum and Dad fought a lot, and sometimes it got nasty. I would hide in my room during those times. The sounds of yelling and breaking things coming from downstairs kept them from getting away. Kevin would often come into my room during those sad times. We'd put on music together and turn it up just loud enough to block out the yelling. The songs would take over our minds. It helped us deal with things and gave us a break from the real world. It hurt me and my brother that our parents didn't care about us. We learned how to really depend on each other and take care of ourselves. Kevin always tried to keep me with my eyes on the future, even when things were hard in the present. It was his way of telling me to keep my head down and study hard. He told me that if I worked hard, I could grow up and make a different life for myself, away from the problems we were having. There was also no doubt that Kevin was smarter than me, and he always seemed to have a plan in mind. He would say that his dream was to go to college, make a name for himself, and break out of the circle that our parents were in. Kevin was getting better and better at school over the years, but then something strange happened at our church. People started to notice how well my parents' son was doing, and would often tell them. This new attention was big for our family, because school had never been important and our parents had never really been interested in us going to school. Our parents realized that they had something to be proud of for the first time in their lives. It was like a light bulb went off in their heads. That something was my brother Kevin. This is when the favoritism started. Kevin's accomplishments made my parents pay attention, even though they had never asked about our grades or even if we went to school. They quickly took advantage of his success and told our family and neighbors about it as if it were their own. They showed Kevin off to everyone who would listen like he was their most valuable item. They would talk and talk about how well their son was doing, as if his accomplishments could erase the name of the years they didn't care for him. Kevin started to enjoy all the attention, as you might expect. I didn't blame him. Both of our parents were interested in his life for the first time, and they were proud of him in a way they had never been before. It was very different from how things had always been, so I could see why he would want to take it all in. They must have felt like a breath of fresh air when they finally showed interest in him after years of being ignored or brushed off. But what began as my parents' pride in Kevin's accomplishments quickly turned into them comparing me to him. Whenever my grades weren't as good as Kevin's, my mother would make fun of me. I had to put in more effort and be more controlled and focused like him, she told me. She would always say it wasn't enough, no matter how much I tried to tell her I was sorry. It wasn't just grades either. My parents suddenly didn't like it when I wanted to stay after school to play basketball with my friends and just hang out. They would tell me to go home right away and start working on my homework, saying that I had to study hard if I wanted to keep up with their cute Kevin. It was too much for me to handle the new standards they set for me. The things that used to make me happy, like basketball, music, and even just hanging out with friends, were slowly losing their appeal because they were always expecting more and better. As you might guess. Being compared to my brother all the time got to me. I tried to brush it off at first, telling myself that it wasn't really Kevin's fault since I knew he wasn't the one who made things worse. Things started to change over time, though. It looked like Kevin liked the attention he was getting more and more, and that pleasure began to change him. Not long after, he stopped hanging out with me and being there for me, even when I had good things to say about our parents. He stopped standing by me like he used to and started to agree with them. He told me I was overreacting and stopping whining about our parents. He also said they weren't as bad as I made them out to be. When Kevin, the only person who used to understand and help me, said this, I began to doubt myself. I started to think that maybe he was right and I was just thinking too much about everything. But it became more and more clear over time that my parents clearly liked Kevin more than anyone else. Like when my dad got paid, Kevin would go see him and tell him he needed new school supplies like books and pens. My dad would give him money right away to buy any school items he needed. But when I asked for the same things, my dad said no. He would tell me I could use Kevin's old, worn-out books or old, thrown-away stuff instead. If I told him this was wrong, he would say that he didn't have enough money to take care of both of us and that Kevin was more important. It wasn't just bags for school, either. My mom became interested in making meals for my brother all of a sudden, but she would only make meals that he liked. The food was fine whether I liked it or not. It was important that it made my brother happy. To be told that my needs were less important just because I wasn't Kevin was very upsetting and insulting. Little things like these kept adding up. Every one of them kept reminding me that our parents thought Kevin was more important. At the same time, Kevin started to think that he deserved it more. So he didn't say anything about the favoritism. And the truth of it hurt more than anything else. It made me sad to lose my brother, the guy who was always there for me. And since Kevin was no longer on my side, I felt like I was going through all of this by myself. The one strong link we had was weakening, and I didn't know how to deal with the rising anger and sadness that it caused. I was really happy for Kevin. When he got into a good college with a full grant because of how well he did in school. And I was happy to see him finally get the praise he earned. It made our family proud. In order to celebrate Kevin's success, my parents chose to take him to a fancy dinner. They were very excited and wanted to show him how proud they were. They told me that this dinner was only for Kevin when I asked if I could join to be a part of the party. That hurt to hear. It hurt even more that Kevin didn't say anything to defend me. He didn't invite me or do anything else to make me feel like I was welcome. It broke my heart because he didn't speak up for me like he used to. At that point, I realized Kevin liked being the center of attention, and that I was no longer important to him. I didn't want to fight with them and ruin his night, so I left my brother and my parents to enjoy themselves. When Kevin finally moved out a few days later to start college, the house felt strange and empty. When it was just my parents and me, things went back to how they were before Kevin started to do well. But this time it felt even worse. My parents stopped talking to me, even though they were so proud of Kevin. It was like they never cared about me before Kevin became their golden child when he wasn't there. They had nothing good to talk about with their neighbors, and they lost interest in my life. When Kevin called them from college was the only time I could hear thrill in their voices. If Kevin answered the phone when it rang, it would make their eyes shine. They got excited all of a sudden and wanted to know about his classes, friends, and life in college. He was like the sun, and everything came around him. My parents would nod when I told them about my school life, but they didn't seem to be interested or ask any questions. They would tell me that Kevin did better than me when he was my age, even though I was working hard and getting better grades. This meant I still wasn't doing enough, as if everything wasn't already painful. I remember once hearing my parents in the living room talking about how happy they were to have at least one amazing child. It hurt like hell to hear this. My dad told me that my mom should have stopped getting pregnant after Kevin, and that they could have given my brother a much better life if they hadn't had me. Those words broke my heart. It was painful to hear my parents say they wished I hadn't been born. I had always known in my heart that they liked Kevin more than me. Was I really just a normal kid? They didn't value me at all, right? Their words made me feel like I wasn't there, like I didn't matter. I began to think that maybe everything I thought about myself was incorrect, maybe I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or unique enough for them to love me. It was hard to live with that much worry. It seemed like I could never compare to Kevin, no matter what I did. Having that much pain is hard to handle, and it made me feel lost and alone in a way I had never felt before. Luckily, during this tough time, I met Nate, who is now my boyfriend. We were introduced by friends we both had. When we first met, he told me that my eyes looked both beautiful and sad. The way he said that made me feel like he saw something in me that most people were missing. He seemed to be able to see through my mask and feel the pain I was carrying. Nate came from a slightly better neighborhood than I did. Even though we came from different places, we quickly found things we had in common. Things that started out as just hanging out slowly turned into something more important. We finally went on a date together, and it was clear that we were meant to be together. It was clear that we had energy. I felt like we clicked in a way I hadn't felt before. Someone once told me that young love doesn't last, but Nate is my first real boyfriend, and I really hope that ours will. He's become such an important part of my life, and I think we should keep our relationship strong. My boyfriend has been a big part of getting me out of the dark place I was in, because my parents didn't care about me. He has listened to me for hours as I've talked about my family, my problems, and the grief I've been carrying for a long time. He never made me think that my pain was too much or that I was a bother. I didn't think it was possible to feel hope and happiness until I met Nate. This gave me the drive to work harder at school and get better grades. I even started part-time jobs to save money and eventually move out from under my parents' roof. While I knew my journey would be hard, Nate gave me hope that it would get better. However, things got even worse for me when I turned 18. I was told by my parents that it was time for me to start renting from them. They already knew I had been saving money from working part-time jobs over the years, and now that I was an adult and no longer needed their help, it seemed like they wanted a piece of that money. I tried to tell them that I was still applying to schools and was waiting to hear back from a few of them. I was about to move out, so I asked them to let me stay rent-free until then, but they wouldn't. They made it very clear that they were done raising me and that I had to leave if I wasn't going to start paying rent. It made me cry a lot because it seemed so wrong. My brother Kevin was never asked to pay rent after he turned 18, not even when he lived with us before he went to college. Another thing that came to mind was how obviously biased my family had always been. I felt lied to. Even with everything going on, Nate asked me to move in with him and said that his parents were fine with it. Really thoughtful and kind of you to offer, and it made me feel so encouraged. And I really liked it, but I wasn't ready. With all that was going on, moving in together seemed like a big step that was taken too quickly. I didn't want to put our relationship at risk by moving in with him before we were both ready, so I had to say no to his offer. I finally had to start renting from my parents. Having to deal with the fact that the people who were meant to help me were now asking for money made it very difficult. In addition to paying the rent, I often helped them pay their bills and buy food when they couldn't. At times, my dad would wait to pay these bills on purpose, spending his money on drugs instead, just so he could ask me to pay them. It was clear he was trying to get what he wanted, and it hurt to see how little he cared about the stress he was putting on me. I didn't say anything, though, because they told me to. It was too dangerous for me to say no because I didn't want to start a fight with them. Kevin called our family to tell us some bad news. The woman he was seeing was pregnant. Kevin had only been seeing this woman for a few months, so this came as a big surprise. This was a surprise that none of us saw coming. Kevin's voice was tense and desperate when he called. He said that his girlfriend's family was very strict and didn't like it when women got pregnant before they got married. So, while she was pregnant, his girlfriend needed a safe place to stay. Since rents were already too high, he wanted to move back in with her. Kevin also said he didn't want to spend all of his money on rent and bills but instead wanted to save it to help raise his child. He told them it was only going to be temporary until they could get back on their feet and find a better place to live. I was shocked when my parents agreed to his request without even talking to me about it. I couldn't help but be confused and, to be honest, annoyed by how eager they were to help him. Our house wasn't very big, so the thought of Kevin, his woman, and their baby all fitting into his old room seemed silly, if not impossible. But the day after I talked to Kevin, my parents called me in to tell me that I had to leave their house because Kevin and his girlfriend were finally moving in. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I heard. If I asked them why, my dad said it was because they needed to turn my room into a nursery for the baby. I tried to fight with them by telling them this was not fair. I told him that I had nowhere to go in that. Kevin, being an adult, should be able to handle things without blocking my path. My parents were not moved, though. Instead, they told me this was about their baby and that I should stop fighting with them because I was selfish and a freeloader. I didn't tell them that I was still trying to figure out my future or that I had to pay rent every month. Their only goal was to help Kevin and make sure the baby had a place to sleep. My mom told me straight out that I had 1 week to pack up and leave. In this case, I had no choice but to take Nate up on his offer to move in with him. Nate was, of course, very helpful and helped me pack up my things and move them into his truck. I tried not to cry as I packed, but I couldn't. No matter what. That house, especially my room, had been my safe place for many years. I had grown up there, cried myself to sleep there, and dreamed of a better life. I really didn't like that house, but losing my room was like losing everything I knew was safe. I had no choice, though. For me, moving in with Nate was a big change that wasn't easy at first. Nate's parents knew what was going on with me and seemed to really feel bad about it. Even though I respected their efforts to make me feel at home, it was still hard to adjust. At the same time, Kevin and his partner moved in with our parents as planned. After the move, Kevin only called me once, most likely because he felt he had to. He wanted to know where I was. He told me that our parents had pretty much kicked me out to make room for him and his new family. It was my guess that he would be shocked, or at least worried, but he tried to play it down. As if being kicked out of my house wasn't a big deal, he said that what had happened was just a small sacrifice for his family. What I heard made no sense to me. I told him that our parents had treated us differently over the years and that they had always picked on him and ignored me, even more so now. Kevin, however, didn't try to understand. Instead, he told me I was being childish and accused me of being jealous. I knew at that point that I could no longer have a normal relationship with him. I thought that maybe, deep down, he still cared about me as his sister, but his response made it clear that I was being left alone. I made up my mind right then that I was done with him and our parents as well. I wasn't going to get in the way of them living happily ever after with their golden child and his girlfriend. No matter what, I had to let go and focus on myself for good, even if that meant breaking up with them. Things are starting to go well now that I've lived with Nate for 3 months. My life has become a lot more steady, and living with him has helped me get used to the schedule. During this whole time, my parents have never reached out to me. They haven't called to see how I've been doing or to see if I'm okay. So when I got a call from my mom today out of the blue, I wasn't planning to answer. Later, during my lunch break, I saw that both of my parents had missed calls, which made me feel a little worried. I decided to call them back, and when I did, my dad told me that Kevin and his girlfriend had moved out of my parents' house in secret the night before, and they had only found out about it this morning. I was shocked and asked for more information. It turns out that my parents were comfortable with Kevin and his woman moving in at first, but they didn't know how expensive it would be. My dad was upset because she ate everything. My parents didn't think it would cost so much to fully take care of 2 extra people living with them. When the bills started to add up, my parents asked Kevin and his girlfriend to help pay for food and other costs. Kevin and his girlfriend said no, though. They said that it wasn't fair to ask them to pay for anything since the terms hadn't been talked over before. When they moved in, they thought they wouldn't have to pay rent or any other bills. My parents told Kevin that they were having a hard time paying all of their bills. Kevin tried to convince my parents that since he was their son, they should help him out without any problems. The fight between the 4 of them got worse, and my mom got so mad that she called Kevin's girlfriend a gold digger for living with them for free. Kevin even wrote in a note that he was done with my parents for good. Since then, my mom has called him and his lover several times to say sorry, but they have not answered. My dad chose to ask me for help in the middle of all this chaos. He asked me to call Kevin and see how he was doing. I told him I would do my best, even though my brother and I didn't get along very well. Then my dad asked me to do something shocking. He told me that he and my mom had talked about it, and they wanted me to go back home. I found it strange that they would want that, since they had just kicked me out 3 months before. They could start getting rent from me if I moved back in, my dad said, which would help them pay their bills and take care of Kevin and his lady for free, so they wouldn't have to pay anything. My dad was so rude as to suggest that I sleep on the couch in the living room since my room had already been turned into a nursery. I couldn't believe what I was hearing and just shook my head. That was after they kicked me out to make room for Kevin and his new family. Now they wanted me to come back, pay rent, and pretty much just live on the couch. I was so mad that I told my dad straight out that I was not moving back in with them. I told him that he and my mom should be ashamed of themselves for even suggesting such a stupid idea to me. Why didn't AITA want to move back in with my parents? Update 1. I'm glad that everyone agrees that I'm not to blame and finds it funny that my parents think they deserve everything they get. Why am I thankful for Nate? I don't know what I would have done without him in my life. I did call Kevin to see how he was doing after talking to my dad because I was worried. A text message told me he's busy right now but will call me back soon. So I'll post an update here once I've talked to him. So I talked to my brother and found out that my mom and his woman were having more problems than my dad had told me about earlier. Unfortunately, it turned out that my mom would constantly say mean things about Kevin's girlfriend's looks. She would tell you what to buy for baby clothes and how the room should look. There was even a fight between our parents and Kevin and his girlfriend over the baby's name. They said they had to choose a name for my dad's side of the family because they thought it was too easy. When Kevin's girlfriend said no, my mom yelled at her, telling her to be more polite and learn how to make family choices. So after the big fight, Kevin thought it was best for his girlfriend's mental health that he and she move out right away. They are currently staying with one of his friends, and Kevin told me that they are fine. He also admitted that I was right the whole time about how badly our parents treated us, and told me he was sorry and that he should have listened to me sooner. I have to say that hearing my brother say that made me feel a little better. I'm sorry, but I don't think that being sorry once will fix everything. The only reason my brother finally got it was because our parents were mean to his girlfriend in the same way they were mean to me. Update 3. Thanks for all your help over the past few months. I'm truly happy to say that I have finally been accepted to a nearby college. Nate and I are thrilled to begin this new phase of our lives together. For his help, I've been able to save a good amount of money. I'm now going to move into a small flat with someone else. For those who are interested, Kevin and his lady are doing great. My friendship with my brother has also gotten a lot better since we both cut ties with our parents. I'm thankful that my parents kicked me out so they could have my brother. It really pushed me to leave them and do more things for myself.